So, welcome back to Third Age Reforged and to another battle replay and to another custom scenario given to me by Eclipse 2500 of the Dark Cloud. Now, this one, I believe, it's an entirely Dol Amroth themed defence, and it's got that sort of Gondorian, Dol Amrothian architecture going on. But it does seem to be in a sort of wintry, more mountainous region and not on the coast like most of Dol Amroth's settlements are. I'm sure there is one, because there is mountains within Dol Amroth's borders, and I'm sure there was something there, but I'll have to have a look up on some of the relevant wikis to actually see what settlement this could possibly be, so I can actually give it a name. For now, though, we shall just refer to it as a Dol Amroth city in the mountains, and it is going to be, I think, an entirely Dol Amroth force facing off against an entirely Umbar force on the attack. And this is going to be a battle that gets underway really very, very quickly, because there is no deployment phase in this one, and very soon we will see this cavalry force here from Mr. Sneakman have to collide with the Umbar force that Froggy is commanding at the moment. Very interesting map actually this, so I guess we are kind of on the coast. This is more of a river, to be honest with you, or an inlet, but I'm sure there is a settlement that I could give this an appropriate name for. But yeah, there's a lot going on. To be fair, most of the outskirts features, while there is stuff going on the outskirts, like little valleys and little fishing areas, and then there's this keep over here, of course, they won't really be coming into effect. But the city itself is also rather large. It's got the feel, to be honest with you, of a city map from the sort of standard rotations, only with less open areas around the outside of the walls and a more complex shape as well. Most of the cities just tend to be a flat square. This one has got a little bit more interest going on, and also there's a little bit more terrain within the city as well. A lot of the regular cities tend to be quite flat as well, whereas here you can see there's more features within. So it should be quite an interesting one, this. Fairly open though, lots of surface area. It is, however, I think a 4v4, I believe. Possibly. Yes, it is. It's a 4v4. So Dol Amroth actually stand a very reasonable chance, I think, of fighting tooth and nail to actually defend this, even though Umbar sieges tend to be more about the infantry, and Umbar definitely have the edge there, although there is some orc forces as well by the looks of things as well. Speaking of which, we will go through the attacking armies first and foremost, starting off with Eclipse himself, who is playing as Mordor. So he has got some Orc Maulers with an armour upgrade. Tends to be in Eclipse's scenarios, if you can have a visual armour upgrade, he will apply it. Albeit for the Orc Maulers it is somewhat... I mean, it does make a difference, but to be fair, their weaknesses are still very much the same. They've got very low melee defense, and arrow fire will still shred their way through them because the armour upgrade is not enough to make up for the fact they don't have a shield and they're relatively weak to start with. Moran on infantry, numerous, going to be important in a battle like this because you're going to need the numbers to do the damage against Dol Amroth's infantry. You need to be careful of cavalry, of course, because cavalry will have a field day charging in to blocks of Moran on infantry because they can't really do an awful lot of damage in return. Over here we've got some rangers, some Adonai shadow bows, of course. Body-piercing projectiles, still very much the kings of siege battles. That won't be the case forever, but for the time being it still very much is. And the Adonai, of course, have got that extra armour, which means they're not quite as vulnerable to the standard ranger counters of just shooting at them with another unit of archers. Moran on infantry here as well. Got some Minas Morgul chosen. A unit like this is going to be important for the anti-cavalry they have, but also for the fact that they are very tanky, very difficult to kill. They're not really very good at dealing damage to other infantry, but that's not really their role. They're there to stay alive as much as possible and keep Mordor's lines solid. A couple of units of them. We also have some Sauron's Will. Armour piercing will be useful against Dol Amroth because most of their units, in a similar vein to Gondor, rely on armour to some extent to make up for a few of their shortcomings. To be fair though, with Dol Amroth's heavier focus, I should say, on heavy swordsmen, they do have plenty of melee defense in certain areas, so we'll see if that unit can be as useful as I think it should be. Orc Maulers and Orc Javelins, so again, more cheap AP that they have at their disposal. We have a Troll Catapult over here, which is very useful just because it moves more quickly and the crew itself is not quite as defenceless as a normal Orc Catapult crew is. Melkor's Chosen, a very important unit in this battle because we've already seen that Dol Amroth are going to have plenty of cavalry to sally out with, and the Melkor's Chosen will give any Dol Amroth cavalry a fight. Even the Mighty Haven Knights will want to carefully consider if it's worth going up against the Melkor's Chosen. Temple Executioners, of course, one of the units which can definitely contest the heavy swordsman crown in this particular battle with something like the Haven Guard, which I assume we will be seeing. Blackguard of Barad-dûr will be excellent for pushing their way through any narrow defences that Dol Amroth may have set up. Moran on Halberds will be good for sort of reinforcing lines with the phalanx. Having said that, Dol Amroth have got access to pikes, so do be careful with that. finally at the back, got some Uruk captains. Again, AP, very useful against a faction like Dol Amroth. And then over here, also in the south, another Mordor army under the command of Stewie. He too has some Morannon halberds. To be fair, as long as they can avoid the pikes, they should actually be nice and efficient, because that armour piercing will be handy. Dol Amroth, of course, have got a better unit of halberds at their disposal as well, but still. Interesting to see the Ardenheim Shadowbows pushing the siege tower. I imagine that won't be the case for too long. Very odd choice indeed, but as I mentioned, there is no deployment phase in this battle, so it was just there from the start. I'm sure Stewie will probably change that around as the battle goes on. Got some Morannon infantry as well, again, just to pad out that the army numbers a bit. Sauron's Will, useful, like I said. They're going to be more useful than the Orc Maulers overall, because they're just a better unit, but the Maulers are here as well. Interesting to see this unit here. The Beasts of Gorgoroth, the Great Beasts. Now they have the same problem that we saw in the very last battle as the Mumakil, only it's actually even more of a problem with the Beasts of Gorgoroth because they're even more fragile. Now they do have one thing over the Mumakil, and that is the fact that their crew on the back here use javelins rather than arrows. That does mean they actually have more close range punch with their ranged attack. Having said that, you know, charging through the lines, a task that you would imagine a unit like this would be very, very good at, because of the way that Reforged is set up. Bestial units like this tend to do quite poorly. So they could be useful, but for the most part I would imagine they're just here for the spectacle of things. I'd be very surprised if they managed to achieve anything too significant. We've also got the Black Riders, which are a unit you don't see in Mordor's standard roster. You're only going to see these lads in a custom scenario. The mounted version of the Nazgul, of course, really, really solid. If you can combine them with something like the Melkor's Chosen, Dol Amroth won't really be able to do a great deal about them, but we'll see how that goes. Orc Javelins, again, useful, so cheap, you know, effective for what they are. More Temple Executions with the armour upgrade here at the back. A lot more Blackguard of Barad-dûr as well, so plenty of opportunities to push through with sheer mass. And some Uruk captains back here as well, that armour piercing going to be quite handy. Temple Guard as well, armour piercing arrows and Morannon archers. I don't think Eclipse actually had anything other than his rangers for archers, so it's probably for the best that Stewie does have a couple of units of archers just so they can try at least and get involved in the ranged battle. And the Morannon archers are one of those awkward archers that are not good enough for you to want to shoot them, but you're kind of forced to, because if you don't they will rack up a kill count. Then over here in the north, already claiming this section again, sort of a very rivery area, we have one of the two Umbar armies played by Alexander 10Q. He's got some Harbingers of Castamere. The rare situation in which, of all the bodyguard swordsmen on the map, they're probably going to be the weakest, because the upgraded Temple Executioners and the Haven Guard have them beat, but even so, they're still a fantastic unit, and you're not going to be seeing them go one-on-one with the equivalent units anyway. That's not how it works in a real battle situation. 2 units of Naru Sentinels, however, is probably even more significant because they are a fantastic unit of pikemen. Dol Amroth certainly don't have anything that can match them in this regard. Difficult to shoot down as well because of their heavy armour and the fact that they actually have a shield value. You could make a case for saying they're the strongest pike in the game. I think, to me, they're definitely in 3rd place. You definitely have to put the Lothlorien pikes and Khazad-dûm pikes ahead of them, but I would rate them more highly actually than the Imladris ones. They don't do as much damage as quickly, but the fact that they counteract the normal pikemen counters even better than the Imladris pikes do means I do rate the Naru Sentinels above the Imladris sentries actually. Controversial take, I know, probably not going to be very popular for that. Naru Royal Guard here as well, a fantastic heavy archer, very difficult to shoot down as well, as is most of Umbar's army, to be honest with you. Belagai footmen, again, armour upgrades all round, but the armour upgrade will make them better at surviving, but they're still not a very damaging unit against enemy infantry, to be fair. Belagai archers, a very useful unit of archers for skirmishing with, especially with the armour upgrade. Going to be awkward for Dol Amroth to have to try and deal with them. Another unit of them here. A couple of units of Balakith shield bearers, once again, armour upgrades all round. And they'll be useful as well. They are a inferior maceman, I should say, to the Black Swan Renegades that could be on the defence, but even so, the extra AP will be handy. And then over here, we have some Balakith Axe Guard, so probably the better of the two, to be fair, of the 2 Balakith units, because they do lack the shield, but they have more punch because they have a 2-handed axe rather than a mace. We also have some Alcarondas Legion, plenty of them. High quality army this from Alexander 10Q. The Mordor armies had more sort of basic units, whereas this Umbar army is very, very strong, but it's a 4v4, so you need a bit of strength if you're on the attack here. And we've got some Ardenheim Lancers as well. They'll struggle against the Dol Amroth cavalry, to be honest, some Belagai pikes pushing up the ram as well. Then finally in the north, another Umbar army, Froggy going to be coming under pressure from that cavalry very, very quickly. Got some Elcarondas Legion here in numbers. Certainly a superior line infantry unit to anything that Dol Amroth has, and I would include the Black Swans in that. The Black Swans with their AP might beat the Elcarondas Legion 1-1, but for an all-round unit, the Elcarondas Legion are far superior in my eyes. Belagaya footmen are over here as well. Some Adonai Shield Guard, actually. I thought they were going to be Sentinels for a second there, but no, the heavy spears are very, very tanky, as you would expect from such a unit. Not necessarily great at dealing damage for the cost, but that's not what you expect from spears. Belagaya footmen, some more Adonai Shield Guard, plenty of pikes as well, the Belagaya pikemen. Be interesting to see what came out on top between them and the Dor and Ernil. You'd probably give the slight edge to the Dol Amroth ones, but both can have their armour upgraded, so it's kind of the waters are muddied somewhat. Narun Iron Guard are already getting ready to fire. Belagaya footmen are here. Axemen also in behind. Corsair Black Guards and some Balaketh marksmen are over here as well. Obviously decent in melee, I would say, actually. Not necessarily great considering the calibre of units we're probably going to be seeing, but still. Black Guards, plenty of units here. Now then, let's have a look at what Dol Amroth have got to work with. Starting off here, Mr. Sneakman playing as one of the Dol Amroth armies. Now, this cavalry is staring down the barrel of an entire Umbar army, so it'll be interesting to see how this does. We'll be obviously moving over here when the battle actually begins. Perithil Horse Guard, melee cavalry primarily, more so than lance cavalry, and there isn't a great deal of, well, no cavalry over here from the enemy. Also got some Perithil Riders who are already knocking their arrows as well. Going to be difficult with this many archers around, however, to really get some good value off. I mean, as far as horse archers go, they're well armoured, but Umbar should still be able to deal with them. This is probably the unit that Umbar will be most scared of facing down, because they are a unit of lancers which are capable of doing quite a lot of damage. Knights of the Silver Swan, maybe not quite so much as a unit of knights, but still, they will get their lancers down, they will do damage. The siege equipment could get in the way, but we shall have to wait and see on that one, won't we? Meanwhile, within the walls, we've got some Athalond Halberdiers. They'll be good at holding the line as long as they're not going directly after pikes. We've got some Dor and Ernil pikemen here as well, with the armour upgrades. So yeah, they'll be good at holding the line. So plenty of phalanxes, heavy swordsmen as well, en masse, Haven Guard. We've got some Perithil champions as well. Fear causing could be an issue, but Umbar are better at dealing with morale shocks than most, certainly better than most evil factions. Belfalas Marines just in behind, javelins. As long as you can maintain a good defensive position, even a basic unit of javelins like this can really do a lot of good damage to high priority targets. Got some Black Swan Renegades back here as well, nice amount of AP coming from those Macemen. Got some dismounted Silver Swan Knights. Of course, the inspiration effects of the units at the moment don't really work properly, so they really are just a decently bulky multiple HP line infantry unit that slightly underperforms for damage, but because they're multiple HP they can survive longer. Tirithea marksmen are on fire at will, I would imagine, because they don't have the best angle, but they could have when they get onto that wall. I think that's pretty much the bulk of Mr. Sneakman's army. Out here, meanwhile, we do have King Ammar, who potentially is going to meet Umbar on the open field. That would be an interesting choice. He's got the mighty Haven Knights, who will be a concern, even though they don't have lances. Got some Athalon men-at-arms with the armour upgrade, but they're still going to struggle against the upper-end Umbar units. They'll be decent at holding the line with that armour upgrade, but it's going to be tough for them in this battle. Umbar very much an infantry wrecking ball. The Black Swan Renegades will be much better prepared for dealing with most of the Umbar forces, but there's only so many of them. Athalond Halberdiers will be useful. Got some more Athalon men-at-arms. The Tarnostian Spearmen are very much akin to the Belagaya footmen, only you don't see them quite as much because Dol Amroth have got to spend their money in other places more so than Umbar do. Got some more Tirithea marksmen, so plenty of archer power over here. They'll be a worry for Umbar, certainly. Some Dor and Ernil swordsmen, so some militia back here as well. 2 units of the dismounted Silver Swan Knights, 2 units of the Perithil champions in the background over there, and of course the mighty Haven Guard. Now, moving over to the northern edge of the settlement, that's still Mr. Sneakman's army. As we move over here, he's actually got another unit of Belfalas Marines and some Dor and Ernil archers over there. The northern approach is an interesting one. It's quite narrow. We can see Tundra's Foxes over here. He's got some cavalry of his own, including some Perithil Riders. He's got some Arathirim, which is fairly substantial, because of course they have multiple HP. They are knights, so they will do more damage than something like the mounted Silver Swan Knights. Having said that, the Arathirim have constantly let me down in the past, and I'm not entirely sure why. Their stats mean that they shouldn't have, but yeah, based on experience, of all the knights, they're one of the ones that I don't actually rate all that highly. We shall see if they can do the business this time, though. The Thalon men-at-arms in numbers here with the upgrades once more. Tarnostian spears, we have a trebuchet. Dismounted Silver Swan Knights again. Tirithea marksmen, so again the army outside of the settlement. Plenty of pikes and some Peridot champions over here. More Black Swan renegades and some Haven Guard in there as well. And finally, pointing southward, I think we have Guro-Chan. Yes, we do. He's got 2 units of Haven Guard. Greedy. Waiting within the walls, and the rest of his army once again is going to be outside of it. 2 units of the standard Swan Knight. Someone I think was asking if this unit was still in the game. Yes, it is. But like I said, they are a single HP cavalry unit, so you don't see them brought all that often, because multiple HP cavalry is by far and away the superior choice in the current meta of the game. But they're still a decent melee cavalry unit. Not so decent that they can go up against Melkor's Chosen, but we shall see how it goes. Doran Ernil pikemen are back here as well. Some Tarnostian spearmen. Again, the Black Swan Renegades. Much of the defence is going to be dependent on how well this unit of Macemen does across the field, I think. The Thalon Halberdiers, men-at-arms as well. More Doran Ernil archers. And we have some Belfast Marines on the front, and that's pretty much it. There's probably Nimrodel Rangers skulking around as well somewhere, at least one unit, 1 or 2. But yeah, as we move back over to the northern edge of the settlement here, without further ado, let's get this show on the road. Now then. Ah yes, the towers. I'd almost completely forgotten to take those into effect, but because this is using standard city architectures, they will have access to defensive towers, the defenders as well, so they have a good amount of tools at their disposal here. Meanwhile, some good point-blank shots here from the Peridot Riders into the Alcarondas Legion, but of course Umbar are going to be responding in kind with some volleys of their own. Dol Amroth are going to try and squeeze their way around this flank, and they should be able to be fair, but I mean, as soon as the Corsair Blackguards start throwing their javelins in, which is definitely worthwhile to do so, several of those cavalrymen do end up falling as a result of these volleys from both units of Corsair Blackguards. In all fairness, this is javelins that Umbar won't be able to use later on to clear out any choke points, but it's definitely worth trying to squash this cavalry force underfoot as quickly as they possibly can. The Alcarondas Legion are going to try and just get in the way of the Peridot Riders and Horse Guard. Peridot Riders not enjoying the attentions of the Umbar infantry at all by the looks of things. Alcarondas Legion, they're going to try and escape out into the open field. The Knights of the Silver Swan have managed it, but they've taken a lot of damage themselves. The Peridot Riders will also do so, with actually less damage in the end. The Horse Guard, though, they are the ones who took the brunt of that, because they are going to rout them with the red line being so close. Those 11 melee cavalry are not going to be returning. There are some Corsair fences as well. They're in fire at will mode, though, so this could be a bit of a waste of a volley of the throwing knives that assassin class units have, of which the Corsair Fencers are certainly one. Meanwhile, being still on fire at will with his Balakith Marksman as well means that he is firing up into the air. Oof, dear oh dear, that frame rate. Tends to be that this sort of thing settles down after a little while, but still, firing over the walls. Umbar will now sort of reorganise themselves after this, I'm sure. What have we got over here meanwhile? The Black Riders going this way. The Black Riders are going this way on their own, which I think is a bit of a disaster waiting to happen. The Arathirim and the Peridot Riders together can certainly take the Black Riders on, especially if the Arathirim get a big meaty charge into them. It could be disastrous for Stewie to send the Black Riders around here, to be honest with you. More to the point though, the Peridot Riders can just skirmish with them. I mean, that it will take pretty much the entirety of their ammunition supply to make any sort of impact on a unit with as many hit points as the Black Riders. But I mean, you may as well. It's questionable how useful the Horse Archers will be in other situations throughout the battle anyway. Meanwhile, the battered remnants of Mr. Sneakman's cavalry force linking up with King Amar's Haven Knights. I mean, this is a cavalry force you can't afford to ignore, but it's also going to be quite difficult, I think, to find any gaps in Alexander's army over here. He's already got himself set up reasonably well. Is there going to be any ripe targets for charging into? We shall have to wait and see. Meanwhile, Beasts of Gorgoroth moving forward. It's a pretty intimidating sight, this. Dol Amroth, interesting to see what they do. I mean, Swan Knights, would they charge into the Beasts of Gorgoroth willingly? don't quite know how well that would go. I mean, the Beast of Gorgoroth, that kind of unit is weak enough to the point where I think the Swan Knights would probably be fine, but if the Melkor's Chosen are on the way as well, it could be a bit of a concern. Olag High are there as well, which I somehow missed in the compositions. What a thing to miss. Meanwhile, here in the north is where it must take quite a lot of effort to get the siege tower up and over that particular hill, but it is going to be up here in the north where the first of the battles is going to be getting underway. Both cavalry and infantry. That is going to be the situation. Meanwhile, just a quick look over here. Yeah, the Black Riders thinking about charging. They did actually charge into the Tarnostian Spearmen by the looks of things. That's a bold move, because they are spears. It will take a while to burn through the hit points, like I said. Parathil Riders are over there as well, but still worth bearing in mind. Meanwhile, here in the south as well, if the minimap will actually cooperate with me. Here we go. Swan Knights are charging in. I mean, a charge on the Trolls won't be the worst idea, but they're not Lance Cavalry, the Swan Knights, so how useful they're actually going to be in this sort of situation is debatable. The Javelins are also coming forth. You can see, though, the Beasts of Gorgoroth are suffering under the Zweihanders that the Swan Knights have. So yeah, the anti-cavalry bonus. You see there the folly, really, of the monster class units in Reforged. They just don't work because they're just not strong enough. They're not survivable enough. It's a difficult thing to balance, though, because they have so many HP and hit points as it is, especially the Mumakil, that it can be quite tricky to sort of judge, but something needs to be done with them. We saw in the last battle with the Mumakil, and we see here as well, like they're not up to task. They're not useful enough to be picked, ever. And we won't even get to see them crashing through an infantry line here, because they've been surgically removed from proceedings by the Swan Knights. Olag High, meanwhile, have really done a bit of a number on these Swan Knights as well. If this had been a unit with a lance, the Olag High probably would have fallen by the wayside as well, but because they're not sufficient enough to bring them down. Meanwhile, Haven Knights running away from the Balagai footmen as they're being shepherded away. Over here, meanwhile, Umbar are claiming the walls very, very quickly, actually, which is quite interesting. Ooh, what's going on there? Yeah, Balaketh marksmen able to get up onto the hill here and shoot right over the walls. The terrain proving to be a massive problem for Dol Amroth here, which, I mean, to be fair, the fact that they've elected to completely surrender the walls immediately to Umbar means they are kind of asking for this. They need to reposition themselves here at this point, Dol Amroth, get themselves behind some buildings, try and draw Umbar in so that you can try and sandwich them, perhaps. What is this? Oh, I see. We've got some Ardenai and Shadow Guard taking up position over here. I don't know if you can actually... Can you get down over here? This could be a route that you can take to get down. It's kind of difficult to tell sometimes in the South mode, but maybe they could flank around as well. So Dol Amroth, they need to organise themselves quickly here. Otherwise they could find themselves in a very awkward spot, because they've surrendered the walls, and now Umbar can of course shimmy along the walls at will, basically, and pick and choose where they engage. Could be a concern here. I mean, to be fair, stuff like Parathor Champions is going to have a pretty easy time against Balagai Footman, armour upgrades or no. They're going to meet one another on the stairs, I guess. It's going to be an easy win, that, for Dol Amroth. But if Umbar can be aggressive here for Oggy, if he can keep the aggression up, he needs to get his reinforcements a little bit closer. I know that the walls and the arrow towers will be shooting at them, but for me, there's a golden opportunity here. Dol Amroth have been quite accommodating. They're going to let you in. You're going to need to go forwards with a decent amount of strength in order to make that stick. The Arathira are within the walls now from Tundra's Fox, which is quite interesting. Umbar's sort of moving their way forward, so yeah, you can get up here actually, which is pretty interesting. Get a unit of archers up here and shoot down. It's rather unique. Meanwhile, Haven Knights are over here. They're going to bring down a section of wall by the looks of things with their troll catapult is Eclipse. Dol Amroth will need to get some of their units off of this wall. You can see a unit of Doran Ernil archers from Kuro just sort of holding their ground. Not many of them will die actually as a result of that piece of wall crumbling, I don't think, but because this unit is now so stretched out, moving them once that section of wall has been destroyed might be a little bit awkward. Swan Knights are moving backwards as well. Yeah, but they've repositioned themselves within the settlement, which is fair enough. And there are the really nasty Wanderers of Nimrodale. Let's have a little look, though, what's going on over here. Unsurprisingly, the Parathil Champions... Actually, that was a fair amount of those archers that just died, wasn't it? I think they were trying to move off the wall, actually, and moved into harm's way, ironically enough. Perithil champions, especially with tower support, are easily going to have the beating of Balagai footmen. Don't know what's going on here. Getting some archers up on the walls, perhaps. Meanwhile, artillery action going on, hitting Froggy's infantry. The walls crumbling causes the frame rate to absolutely nosedive. You love to see it. The trebuchet, meanwhile, doing a huge amount of damage to Froggy. And again, I feel as though both players over here have been a little bit too willing to stand off the other. Umbar have got a golden opportunity here to get into the settlement and claim some territory for themselves, but you can never dither when you're the attackers or the defenders, because if you do, you're just going to find yourself getting picked off by ranged units. Meanwhile, not sure what happened here per se, but some units are dead on the floor. Balakith marksmen moving forward again. Too much of the army is just waiting around out there. Like I said, I think that's actually a fairly big error, but we'll see. We'll see how Umbar get on throughout the battle. These Dol Amroth troops also fell back from King Ammar, so Alexander 10Q is moving forward. Again, a little bit of a disjointed feel to this attacking force thus far. Dol Amroth are actually flooding out of the settlement again, which is quite interesting. There's not many of these Olag Kai left, so their encounters with the cavalry did ultimately have a bit of an impact. There's only a single unit of Tarnostian spears out here. Some cavalry roaming around as well, but very, very depleted. Meanwhile, these Doranernal archers are shooting. The arrow towers, of course, are still firing away. What have we over here? A mighty encounter between the Melkor's Chosen and the Haven Knights. This fight would, under normal circumstances, be a bit closer. I wonder if the Melkor's Chosen have already taken a few hits from ranged units or from the arrow towers, because I think they would do a slightly better job than this against the Haven Knights, but Dol Amroth victorious there, which will be some comfort to them, I'm sure. Umbar now engaging in melee. This is a little bit strange. I assume they must have used up all of their ammunition. Balakith marksmen and Belfalas Marines. There goes another section of war in the south. I can only assume that must be the case. I mean, they're decent in melee, especially with the upgrades. They should have the beating of the Belfalas Marines, who I think still have ammunition, so it's probably worth engaging them in melee. But with Black Swan Renegades on the way forwards as well. Balakith marksmen in the background. I mean, yeah, this unit of spears over here was just completely destroyed. If you were going to go this far along the wall as Froggy's army here, you needed more than just a single unit of spears that don't do a lot of damage to infantry, especially when you can see there are Black Swans and Perithil champions waiting with open arms. So I think, you know, while there was an opportunity here, I think Umbar have slightly wasted it in the north. Some Mordor units coming around here, not the entirety of that army. Seems like they're going to be pushing more so in the south. Moranon archers firing over the walls, trying to go after the unshielded units. They will score the odd hit and the odd kill, but nothing too devastating. I do like the fact that Dol Amroth is actually defending outside the walls, because it does give them the opportunity to use their own walls as the vantage point, which we don't often see. Meanwhile, in formation, the Minas Morgul Chosen charging into melee now, going to show the Tarnostian spearmen what a real spear can do. Thalon men-at-arms are back there. They're going to move forward as well, but they think better of it when they see the unit they're about to charge into is the Sauron's Will, with an evil glint in their eye. I'm not sure what Dol Amroth are doing here. They need to, whatever they're doing, they need to decide on it a little bit more quickly than this and then organise themselves, because there's plenty of gaps here that Mordor can exploit. They can come forward in force, and while Dol Amroth are still in disarray, really, they can do the business. Are they going to move in now? I think they are. I mean, they're going to get destroyed in melee by Sauron's Will, but maybe now a little bit closer to the walls, the arrow towers, and, well, actually no, they're going to try and get back inside, I think. Again, indecision has been... I mean, to be fair, all of these players played the game plenty in the past, and so far, indecision has paralysed a lot of them. Very strange indeed. It could be that this is a map with some pathfinding issues, but I don't think that's the case. Meanwhile, some Alcarondas Legion are up here on the walls, but King Ammar... Again, it's just a single unit. If there's only one unit that's up here, you don't need to take it as seriously if you're the defenders. And again, in much the same way as Froggy, Alexander's army is far too stretched. It's still far too far back here. You need to be pressing on the settlement with more venom than this, I'm afraid. And the opportunity was there for the attackers, and they seem to be throwing it away. The Umbar players doing, like Mordor doing a slightly better job of it in the south. Meanwhile, Belagaya footmen coming forward with the Balaketh marksmen now. Through sheer numbers and range support, they are overcoming the Black Swan renegades, because under normal circumstances, especially the Belagaya units, would not be doing very well against the Dol Amrothian macemen. So they're going to hold on. Corsair Blackguards are up on the walls as well, which is quite an interesting thing. Malekith Axguard moving forward. Interesting that they still have ammunition, actually, considering they used some of it on the cavalry early on. Those Belagaya footmen have reformed. Again, a single unit of Balaketh Axguard is not going to be sufficient for charging into this defensive line over here, I fear. I do like the Black Swan Renegades in formation, though. The thumbnail will probably be something along those lines. But, I mean, you know, armor-piercing unit to armor-piercing unit, this could be an interesting one. It's just a case of numbers here, like... They're doing the right things, but just not in the quantities here, I think, Umbar. They just need to get some more units forward. Oof, this, however, is an absolute mess of a front line, as you can see. Athalond, men-at-arms, some halberdiers moving in there as well, pikemen. Mordor, however, numbers certainly not a concern for them. Belfast Marines firing into the Uruk captains in the back over there. And I think as well, as we move in over here, you can see the Blackguard of Barad-dûr. If they can push through one of these flanks, it could be a real problem. I do like the fact, however, that Dol Amroth have decided to defend outside the walls, because the shape of the engagement is actually pretty decent for them. They do need to make sure they keep reinforcing it. Now that they've made this decision, they effectively have to go all in on this, because if they don't, then it'll be a complete waste. Javelins, Moranon units and Blackguards taking the brunt of that. We've also got the Temple Executioners moving their way in. Ooh, that's pretty grisly as well. Point blank catapult shots into the Dol Amroth lines. So yeah, I think, as much as I think Umbar have not really approached the battle in an aggressive as way as they should have done, I think Mordor have done a pretty good job in the south. Meanwhile, Orc Javelins firing into this front line as well, made up of pikes, spears and line infantry. Again, the ultimate conundrum: do you waste ammunition on a unit as lowly as the Orc Javelins? Meanwhile, down this narrow road here, this little back street, Alcarondas Legion attacking into the front of Athalon Halberdiers, Belfalas Marines throwing into the side of this Umbar army over here, from both sides actually, so this little wing of the Umbar army is probably going to get squashed underfoot relatively quickly, and still there's units way too far back here, unfortunately. Balaketh marksmen as well, they're being dealt with now that more reinforcements are arriving. Dismounted Knights of the Silver Swan going to be far too strong for the Umbar units that are over here. And then over here, more units are being committed, but again, you can see these axemen were roundly dealt with. It's just a case of not committing enough resources to any one area. Being too stingy. Being too cautious, you could say. I'm not entirely sure what's going on here. They're just about making that work. As they get down onto the walls, Harbingers of Castamere and Alcarondas legions, with their powers combined, will be able to defeat the Haven Guard. But it's still going to be troublesome, especially with the arrow towers here. It'll be interesting to see what Dol Amroth do in that particular fight. Do they not have any rams over here? Because they really need to start using some rams. Meanwhile, a charge coming in here from the mighty Arathirim. It is Belagaya footmen they charge into, though, so a couple of those riders are probably going to die as a result of that charge. Yeah, and the Adonai Lancers, while the Arathirim are better in melee, like the numbers being what they are, Umbar will be able to shut that down. So they are finally getting through the gates now, because the assaults on the walls don't seem to be going too well. The heavy swordsmen and the upgraded line infantry doing a good enough job at keeping Umbar contained, and again, they're just not flooding the walls with as much numbers as they need to here. Meanwhile, what is going on here? The armor-piercing arrows of the Temple Guard trying to find a good place to hit. Again, the Blackguard of Barad-dûr are pushing forward. There goes a Mordor general, which is actually over here, so one of the Mordor generals, I would assume Eclipse's, has fallen. The Blackguard are pushing through. Will they also do the same with the Troll Catapult? Try and knock a hole in this Dol Amroth defensive line? Do they have the reinforcements on hand to follow through? I mean, they do. Morale on infantry. Could charge through the gap that this is making. The trolls themselves as well. There goes a Dol Amroth general. Actually, that was a... I assume that was the Haven Guard on the walls. King Amar's general, I would assume that was, because it was an Alcarondas legionnaire that was standing over his corpse. But yeah, you can see here, this is the strength of the Blackguard of Barad-dûr really pushing through this Dol Amroth front line now. Again, they do need to send forward reinforcements, but they are on the way. It's been a real grindy fight this, but I do think Mordor are going to have the better side of this engagement. So it's all the more important for the defenders that they continue to take advantage of Umbar not committing quite enough to these front lines. Belagaya footmen and pikes trying their hand at cracking through here now. I don't think that's going to be happening though. I think Dol Amroth have got the edge in these fights so far. Tirithea marksmen moving forward to provide some backup as well. Those footmen that did reform are just going to get killed off by the same unit of Parathil champions, unfortunately for them. This fight over here could start going the way of Umbar again. Corsair Blackguards moving onto the front line. The dismounted Knights of the Silver Swan will eventually fall by the wayside if they keep committing units forward. Naru and Aru Royal Guard now on the walls. They do have a nice vantage point up here after all. They're going to be firing into the Belfast Marines, doing some good damage. Umbar were struggling over here, and they are continuing to struggle by the looks of things, and a lot of that is to do with the fact that the ranged units are in such a good position for Dol Amroth. It's so efficient for them at this point in time. Meanwhile, Dol Amroth's general over here did fall, and to be fair, Umbar do seem to be making more headway over here now. We've got some Corsair fencers on the wall who are getting filled with arrows by the Tirithea marksmen. The falling of the gate meant that Umbar could try and split Dol Amroth's attention a little bit more, and they are still putting pressure on lots of armor-piercing units in there, all of the Balaketh, but with the pike support, the Black Swans are in here. Dol Amroth should be just fine holding the gate for now, but now, of course, it's the walls that Umbar could try and flood, and that does seem to be what's happening. Haven Guard actually victorious in the long run over here, but at a cost. I'm not sure what these Harbingers of Castamere were trying to do. Pushing through the lines, that was highly ill-advised, leaving the Haven Guard behind to win that fight. And also, you're just going to get surrounded over here. Dismounted Knights of Silver Swan are a strong unit. You're going to get shot point blank in the back by 2 units of Tirithea marksmen. A bit of a poor judgment call there, I would say, by Alexander. Meanwhile, it's over here. This fight over here is a bit taxing on the frame rate. Hard to tell, really, who's going to be more happy with this fight, because it's been a complete slaughter for both sides. Generally speaking, of course, Mordor tend to be more willing to take losses than Dol Amroth. The Troll Catapult crew is in here, getting bloodied up, trying to get some kills with those spiky clubs they wield. Wanderers of Nimrodel probably had a hand in equalising this fight, I would assume, because there was a point where Dol Amroth looked like they were going to crumble. So I would assume it was the Rangers that brought this back into parity. Uruk Captains, Haven Guard are over here actually. Caught between the Uruk Captains and the Temple Guard. I mean, there's some Morannon Archers over here as well, but they're routing. Haven Guard, though, again, showing their muscle. The quality. And over here, meanwhile, this is now a significant fight as well. It's been quite a chaotic battle, actually, this one. In fact, chaotic enough to the point where I'm actually going to turn it down to half speed for the time being. That is a really, really nice hit by the Dol Amroth Trebuchet. There really isn't much of the crew left. That is going to be, I think, or this as a whole is going to be the last volley that they are able to make, as the Black Riders will kill off what remains of the Trebuchet crew now. And if they don't, then the Mordor Archers surely will. Archers in the backfield. They're going to finish off the Blackguard of Barad-dûr, who are pushing around this flank over here. But the other flank, of course, is also being pressured by the Blackguard, another unit of Blackguard of Barad-dûr. Some Parathil champions not quite quick enough to shut that door in their face. And even with that Trebuchet blow, the front line is looking a better shape for Mordor than it is for Dol Amroth. which is harsh on Dol Amroth. I mean, this attack over here was lagging a little bit further behind because of where the army's deployed relative to this position. Orc Maulers getting to the front line as well. Are they Perithil Riders going to try and shut down what remains of the Black Riders? There's not enough of them to do that, certainly. Blackguard will probably end up routing this one behind enemy lines anyway, but over here Dol Amroth will probably start to struggle as well. There's one of the Black Riders over here actually. The Spearmen may eventually bring him down if they don't rout first because of all of the Orc Maulers and Sauron's will that are all around them. Meanwhile, damage to the buildings over here. Of course, our Blackguards trying to do the same thing to the Dol Amroth defences over here that Dol Amroth have been doing that to them for quite some time, and actually succeeding. They did manage to rout off one of those units of Athalon Halberdiers, but they still have pikes, and they will still be able to hold on to this part of the front line as well. But again, it's been very bloody for both sides, and that tends to favour the attackers, but this is a 4v4, remember. Not like a 4v3 or a 5v3 where that can be a little bit different. Dol Amroth winning in this street still. Belfast Marines showing that there are no pushovers in melee. There goes another Mordor general at the hands of the very bloodied Haven Guard. So both Mordor generals at this point have fallen. Umbar, in order to be useful in this battle in the south, I think they are going to have to rely on their skirmish potential. So I don't think they have enough in terms of infantry power left to really put the screws on Dol Amroth, especially with Mr. Sneakman still having some reinforcements back here. I don't know how King Amar's getting on, because he's being pressured a little bit more. You could say that Mr. Sneakman should be sending a couple of units over here to give King Amar a bit of a hand to try and stop Alexander 10Q's march along these walls. I mean, to be fair, Balaguer archers taking the brunt of the Haven Guard. Not going to be great for them. Again, they seem to be running out of steam a little bit once more, Umbar. This fight going through the gate. Dol Amroth still holding on, but arrow fire coming in here. I don't know who that's from. It should be from Umbar, yeah it is. Balaguer archers in a good position on the walls, trying to support their units as they try and push their way through the gates. Will that be successful or not? We shall have to wait and see. Meanwhile, over here, half speed is a little bit more friendly on the frame rate over here, but Doran Ernil swordsman, a militia tier swordsman, trying to do the business in melee now. Don't know whether they're going to be able to do so. Minas Morgul chosen, Temple Executioners, 52 Temple Executioners, yeah, that's going to be enough to win that. But back over here, Wanderers of Nimrodel, pulling out their swords, Temple Guard. I mean, this is a lot of units back in the backfield over here, and the Uruk Captains and the Temple Guard will fall away. And that's a real problem, potentially, for Mordor in this situation. Wanderers of Nimrodel with those spiky thrusting swords that they have. Perithil champions, a little bit more about chopping with their two-handers. Yeah, the Haven Guard, with their fellow heavy swordsmen, should be enough to clean this up. Still a bit of cavalry buzzing around for Dol Amroth as well, which is quite interesting. And then over here, Temple Executioners, victory seems certain, but it'll be difficult for them. I mean, they're more likely to actually break a unit of pikes like this than kill them off entirely, to be honest. As the poking continues. Athalon men-at-arms moving over here. Dol Amroth still have a bit more to give. Mordor, on the other hand, look like they are going to fall by the wayside over here. So all of a sudden, this fight over here becomes more important for the attackers. The Black Swan Renegades continue to push forwards. Perithil Riders. It looks as though Dol Amroth have actually stabilised the situation over here as well. There's a few reinforcements back there, including the Shadow Bows. If they get a good shot on the defending infantry, then it could all switch around again. But Dol Amroth doing a good job so far on the front line, you have to say. More heavy axemen moving forward, always going to be useful, but you can see lots of Orc Javelins on the front line. They're not going to really achieve too much in melee. And there's still Haven Guard over here as well, so yeah, Dol Amroth doing well so far. Are they going to send more units out here? They are. Tundra's Fox is going to send some more Black Swans and another unit of Athalon men-at-arms, I think sensing the fact that their victory could be at hand. Very interesting indeed. Back up to 1 speed. Umbar continuing. Very much a a cripple fight over here, to be honest with you. One that it looks as though Dol Amroth are eventually going to win, but as soon as they do, they're going to get nailed by some javelins anyway, so unfortunate for them. Froggy, meanwhile, still got those Naru Naru Royal Guard, Alcarondas Legion pushing forward. It does look as though Mr. Sneakman has now moved some of his units back and is going to try and support King Ammar, perhaps. So I'd say this is probably the attacker's best bet at this point. I mean, where else can they really go? The Mordor armies are flagging. Froggy doesn't have the infantry left to really be a major player, so it's going to have to be this Umbar army, I think, if the attackers are to turn this around. I'm not sure whether they can. I think Dol Amroth... I think, to be fair, the attackers had the opportunities early on to really claim some more territory in the city. They elected not to do that. It was a risky move, I think, for Dol Amroth to come outside the walls and defend from the front over here, but it's one that has really paid off for Kuro. And Dol Amroth victorious, you have to say, which this, again, could be the real difference maker. One thing that the defenders have to do, really, in order to defeat attackers is get a good position for their engagement, and I can only assume something we missed was probably the Rangers doing some damage over here, because the only time we've seen them in action over here was in melee, as here, trying to hunt down the Temple Executioners, or at least stop them from moving further through the settlement. And that's really been it from their perspective. So I would assume, because when we looked, Mordor were gaining some ground, and then when we looked back again, they had been almost completely silenced. Meanwhile, Tirithea Marksman, Ardenheim Shadowbows, yeah, Mordor looking like they are really, really struggling at this point. Dol Amroth often get a bit of a hard time, including by me, for the fact that their infantry is good in places, but overall slightly below average. On this occasion, though, with their quality at their back, they've looked very strong, you have to say. Very impressive. I don't think the attackers are going to have any answers to this. Yeah, the Ardenheim Shadowbow is broken and fighting to the death. More mace men coming in. The key unit I said was going to be the Black Swan Renegades. We'll see. I mean, we won't actually see because we'll be looking at this from the attacker's perspective, but I think they have done a good job. Given that armour-piercing bite, which is useful against both Mordor and Umbar. Umbar especially, given the quality they have. I mean, Froggy does have a path he can try and take to get to the town centre, but he'll never make it there, I don't think. Haven Guard, backed up by Phalanx units, are going to be far too strong for anything he has left, even with the qualities that Umbar tend to have. And it is going to be up to Umbar to try and make something happen here. Still, these Haven Guard are slowly but surely hacking their way through the Belagire archers. A mountain of corpses will appear around them over time. Having said that, Umbar do look as though slowly they're gaining... I mean, they've won the wall, but even so they're still having to fight for the gate. Even with that archer support, it's not enough for Dol Amroth to be completely dislodged from their position here. My. Parathor champions moving forwards as well. Again, more reinforcements. Eager for Umbar to be completely stopped. Parathor champions are there. Eclipse, by the looks of things, still has a single unit left. Single unit is the operative word, because it's the banner carrier for the catapult crew. Unlikely to make anything significant happen. Not sure what happens to that Temple Executioner unit. I guess they got overwhelmed and destroyed. And then over here, Mordor again thrown off. So the Orcish army is completely gone. Just making sure they can't get through here for free. A unit of Dornan and pikemen will be left behind to guard that choke point, but the rest of Tundra's army will now be able to get back inside the settlement, and it's looking like a substantial victory here for the men of the Swan. Froggy, I mean, at this point I can understand Froggy being a little bit cautious, because he's probably looking at the situation and thinking, not liking my odds here, but ultimately you have to just move forward. I mean, you are the attackers, and I do think early on the caution from Umbar was probably a little bit... It didn't help matters, certainly. Meanwhile, Tirithea Marksman, decent in melee, certainly. Belagire Footman already seen combat before losing. And they'll take some killing here, the Belagire, because spears like this often tend to be more difficult to kill off. Meanwhile here, Naru Naru Royal Guard firing in point blank. Alexander 10Q might be on the cusp of breaking through as well, but I'm not sure whether he will have enough either. to really make a challenge going into the later stages of this fight. Oof. Doran or Swordsman taking some losses as well. Probably not the target of the arrows, to be fair, just absorbing them. Oh, they are going to charge in. Bit of a strange stagger that, but they do charge in. They won't last very long. They won't do much damage either. These Belagaya footmen are trying their best, but Black Swan Renegades and Haven Guard continuing to do the business against the basic foot soldiers of Umbar. Umbar now getting down off the walls as well, pushing through this door, making this frontline fight a little bit more awkward potentially for Dol Amroth, and especially with those Naru Aru Sentinels. The pike fight will be won by Umbar certainly. There's one Naru Aru Sentinel up here, which is currently in the process of holding back all of these men-at-arms. What have we got in the background there? Mr. Sneakman's cavalry returns. The Swan Knights, there is Kuro's general actually in that unit of Swan Knights, these Ardenayim Lancers. Are they going to be victorious? I mean, the Lancers come down there, you can see. They are going to get charged in the side here by the Knights of the Silver Swan. A good charge it was as well, and that should be enough to bring this fight solidly into the favour of Dol Amroth. Cavalry is their thing after all, heavy cavalry in particular. Poor Eclipse's one guy left. He's like, where's the rest of the army gone? Can't just be me, surely. And there's still some units heading around the back, so you can see Kuro is going to try and, with what he has left, which admittedly is not much, he won that fight, but it cost his army. Definitely worthwhile to make that that decision though. He's going to try and go around and attack Alexander's army from the rear with what he has. And of course, given the fact that Alexander's main strength now comes in the sheer amount of Naru Aru Sentinels he has, definitely the right call for me. Froggy's units are still just sort of hanging out here. I mean, at this point he may as well start to move forward, to be honest with you. There's some crispy corpses from the Trebuchet once again. Still there's a fight going on over here, which is somewhat incredible. Balakith, Axgard and Perithor champions, but now of course Umbar will win because they've got more units on the front. But Tundra's still got his units in position, ready to hold from multiple fronts. And of course, as soon as Froggy makes his decision, it's somewhat inevitable that a large force is going to move to flank around his units. Naru Aru Royal Guard, now Karondas Legion, getting attacked from the front now by Haven Guard. The Thalond Halberdiers also trudging their way into melee. And then we make our way back over here. There is actually some more units that have been committed over here, I think. More units? No, there's still the same unit of Belagaya Footmen and Tirithea Marksmen. Tirithea Marksmen have actually taken a fair amount of losses themselves, to be honest. Should still be a victory though for the Dol Amroth units. There's still heavy swordsmen that could be committed at any moment. And then over here, more units being thrown into the Naru Aru Royal Guard to try and prevent them from firing. Successful though that may be, they're a little bit more cut out for melee combat than the Tirithea Marksmen. The Rangers up on the high ground, I mean, they're going to do a ton of damage there to that Dol Amroth front line. But they themselves are obviously going to be the target of any sort of ammunition that they still have left. There's routing going on from the rank and file units from Umbar, and Mr. Sneakman happily killing the routing units with the unit that he's got in the way. Kuro's army's on the way as well, so time is running out for Alexander 10Q at this point. He either needs to make his way through here quickly, which is not likely to happen given that his general just fell. Because this is the last slim hope that the attackers really have of doing anything substantial in this battle. Damage being done, but the real damage was done earlier in this fight. I think the fight in the south with Mordor was very substantial. A lot of decisions, I think, added up over time. To be fair, as the attackers, in a 4v4 it's more difficult because you don't have an overwhelming numbers advantage. The advantage you have actually is in terms of quality, and if the defenders play their cards right, position their armies well, they can counteract that quality with stuff like javelins and archers more easily. I don't think the attackers helped themselves in several places throughout this battle, but I think the defenders are good value for their win here. blob of Umbar units. Gonna struggle fighting uphill into halberds, macemen. Oof. A nice bit of damage there. There goes a Dol Amroth general. Ardenheim Shield Guard making their way forwards, but yeah, this was always going to happen. As soon as Froggy committed to attacking down one road, he was always going to get a serious flanking force coming his way, but that was just going to be the nature of the beast at this point in the fight. Of course, our Blackguard's going to have to hold back the entirety of what remains of Tundra's wing of the Dol Amroth garrison. Try and get in place, but again, archers shooting into the back of this Umbar force as well. What do we got here? Haven Guard on their way forward, so Kuro has now arrived. There goes Froggy's general as well. So yeah, Umbar, it's fairly clear at this point, I think, that the victor of this battle is going to be Dol Amroth, a defender victory. But with Kuro's arrival as well, they've managed to surround the Umbar force, and of course that means their last true hope in these heavy Umbar pikes is going to be dealt with as well, as the snows fall. What have we here? Wanderers of Nimrodel getting up on the walls. Naren Royal Guard fighting hard. All sides being attacked now, or it will be as soon as these Perithil champions charge in. You would imagine this will be the end of the Royal Guard eventually. This Haven Guard, bloodied up as they are, they've seen a lot of combat at this point. No rest for the weary going up against a unit as strong as the Royal Guardsmen. Surrounded on all flanks there. Defeat seems certain. You don't say. Mordor went all in, it didn't work. Umbar were very conservative early on, and it didn't work. All of the attackers adopting more of a middle ground approach here probably would have been the call to make. It was difficult considering the deployment zones. Froggy had to move forward and try and put some pressure on the walls right away, whereas the Mordor armies in the south were very far off, so such is the way of things. Yeah, now you can see they are caught like a rat in a trap, really, the remainder of the Umbar force down here, or up here in the north. Black Swan Renegades. You can see the Arathurim charging in and out, trying to deal with the Blackguards. It will probably cost them their lives at some point. Hard to judge, really, how effective the Arathurim have been throughout this battle. More arrows coming in from Dol Amroth as well. A bruising encounter, to say the least. Belfalas Marines have also been a bit of a hero in this battle, I would say. They're very basic as far as javelins go, but they've done some decent damage with their javelins from what I've seen. They've also done their job in melee. No one expects them to be a powerhouse in melee, but they've acquitted themselves quite well, I think. Goes to show. Considering how good a ranged unit is in melee is a factor that can come into a battle. Corsair Fencers getting shot. And Froggy may be the last one left here, because I don't think... Yeah, this is it. The Sentinels have been completely destroyed after being surrounded. There may be a strong pike unit, but all pikes take some sort of hit to their stats to prevent them from becoming grossly overpowered. And this is all that remains of Alexander Tenku's army. And surely this single unit of Royal Guard is not long for this world now, with this huge amount of pressure being dumped on them. Wanderers of Nimrodel. Very tanky unit though. That's something you can't fault Umbar for. They definitely have very, very tanky units all round. Fantastic armour at the high end, but this is one of those situations where fighting back to back, fighting to the death. And this city, whatever city I end up pulling from the lore that makes most sense for a location like this, it is on the coast, so I suppose METHRAST would not be the worst thing to call it. There they go. Alexander Tenku's army is destroyed. Oh no, there's still one left. There he is. He's actually surrounded mostly by men-at-arms as well, but the swordsman ultimately ends up bisecting him. And so now we turn our attention to Froggy, the first one to be engaged by Dol Amroth. the last one left alive as well. I think that has more to do with the fact that he left too many of his units too far back early on. He had an opportunity, I think, early on. I still maintain that. Too many of his units were still way back over there when there was stuff going on in the settlement that he needed them for. Ardenheim, Shadow Guard, or Shield Guard. Not much of them left now. I mean, obviously these really high tier Black Numenorian units take some killing, especially the 2 Spearmen units that we've seen be pretty much the last units left standing for Umbar. But not a single Umbar soul managed to get to the town centre. These are the closest. They never managed to get to the town centre. Dol Amroth. It was a tough battle for the attackers, though. The qualities that the defenders had in their army, always going to be difficult. But again, I think based on this siege, there were things the attackers could have done better. Like, it's a lot of surface area for the defenders to try and defend. It's not like a normal city. There are areas where you can't pass through because of the mountains and the topography, but even still, while I think this is one of those sieges where the defenders have got a little bit more of a leg up than you see in a lot of big, like large-scale games, where the defenders clearly have a disadvantage, there were still things the attackers could have done a bit better. Corsair fencers. Assassin-class units with those throwing projectiles can be a real pain in the rear. Few of those Black Numenorians getting involved. Still Haven Guard. You can see all of the Haven Guard we've seen throughout this battle have been very bloodied up. Seeing a lot of action. Exactly where you want a unit like the Haven Guard to be. This does show that if you do have a quality Dol Amroth infantry force, they can mix it with the big boys, really. I think a lot of people, myself included, I would say that it's still the case that Dol Amroth's infantry is, in comparison to a lot of the other Western kingdoms, a little bit more... It is below par, but they make up for that with their cavalry. But if you do want to go fully infantry focused, you can do it as Dol Amroth. There's a time and a place, but it is possible. Mordor have got those numbers after all, and some really nasty high tier units, but Umbar especially, if you can outperform a lot of Umbar's units, like on this occasion, then it goes to show that you're not to be taken lightly. Umbar, of course, their Black Numenorian units are locked morale, otherwise these boys would have routed long, long ago. And a victory for the free folk of Middle-earth. What have we got back here? Just having a little look at what's left. I mean, to be fair, it's a substantial amount of Dol Amroth forces. This isn't a battle that you can consider to be a close one. But Dol Amroth still had to pour their blood, sweat and tears into this victory. It wasn't even as if Dol Amroth's armies were that elite, to be fair. We saw a couple of militia units, big focus around the Doranernal pikes and the Athelon men-at-arms. There was a lot of mace men on the field, and I think the renegades were probably a big factor in the victory as a whole. And there we go. Victory for Dol Amroth. And well deserved it was too. So, once again, it's one of those where we can't actually see which player was which. We can infer certain things though. Can we? I'm not sure really. The Mordor players, it could be either one really. I mean, I guess we'll have a little look. We can tell sort of which one is which because of the units that were in each army. But still, yeah, I think Dol Amroth, good value for their victory here. It was definitely one of those battles where I think the scenario overall was maybe overall was slightly tuned towards the defenders, maybe more than slightly, but you still have to do your job. And I do think Dol Amroth, they took the front foot in the defence, which maybe the attackers weren't prepared for. And I think that fight between Kuro and Eclipse was a real trendsetter throughout the fight. And Umbar were a little bit too cautious. Mordor, they charged in and were dealt with very professionally by Dol Amroth. All of these things just added up to make it a very difficult fight for the attackers. Let's see what did the damage for the attackers though. So this would be Eclipse's army, I would assume. The Uruk captains did decently. Temple Executioners in that big fight actually did do very, very well with 340 kills. You'd kind of expect that against the rank and file of Dol Amroth. They just wouldn't have an answer for the Temple Executioners. Shadow bows, though, 107. Considering the blobs that Dol Amroth were in, you would expect better from a unit of rangers like this. Melkor's Chosen, 20. Again, they got dealt with very nicely by the Dol Amroth cavalry, which that may have been a factor as well. The Dol Amroth cavalry was ultimately victorious, and that had a big impact. Morale on infantry, again, just rank and file really. Troll Catapult, 139. They got some good volleys, but even with those volleys, Dol Amroth was still victorious, so it goes to show that Rangers, if you can use them to their capacity, they're going to do far better for you than even artillery can, which is one of those signs that it's a good thing that they're being rethought in terms of their role within the game. Blackguard of Barad-dûr, they did decently again. They will have caused Kuro a bit of panic, and Tundra's Fox. When you see the Blackguard come forward and start to push through your lines, it can be a bit nerve-wracking, but still doing well there. Orc Javelins, doing okay. Temple Executioners, 257. Yeah, again, like Black Riders, Orc Maulers, the Beasts of Gorgoroth, 19. They're such a bestial units like that do really need a bit of a rethink, I think, because they're just not useful in any sense at all. Like, you would be better off bringing literally anything else in the Mordor roster, especially given how expensive they are. Like, if they're going to be that weak, you make the case for them being actually a very cheap unit to bring, which is a weird thing to think about when you consider what the Beasts of Gorgoroth and the Mumakil and other such units actually are, but yeah, a bit of a rethink is needed there. I think Black Riders did decently, though. They shut down the Trebuchet in the end, but it was a bit too late for them. Shadow Bow's a bit better over here, I suppose. So yeah, such is the way of things. We won't obviously be able to see what Umbar player was what, so it's kind of hard to tell. I would assume that the one that got more kills was Alexander 10Q, purely because he was involved with a more large-scale fight over on his side of things, whereas between Froggy and Mr. Sneakman, it was a little bit more standoffish between the two of them. So I'd imagine that impacted Froggy's kill count as well. But yeah, big thank you to Eclipse for sending this scenario to me. Always glad to see more of what he makes, and a big thank you to all of the players for being a part of this battle as well. So, got a few more replays that I'm going to be getting through. By the time this one comes out, I'm trying to record a bit more in advance again, because chance that there's going to be some things going on, and like I said in the channel update that happened around the new year, there's going to be a few changes that happen at some stage in the year. I'm just not entirely sure when those will be. So I'm trying to sort of build up a bit of a sort of bulk of content that I've done, just in case of any sudden changes, the channel can continue on as it does normally, without any sort of impact, for a little while anyway. Obviously I can't do that indefinitely, but it pays to be as prepared as possible, I think, and that's exactly what I'm trying to do now. So if you do have any replays you want to send me, then I would urge you to do so, because having a large backlog at this point is desirable for me, so that at the very least I can record a bunch in bulk before any changes come into effect, and it won't, at that point any effect on the channel is going to be like negligible, basically. So yeah, that's the situation as it is. As for anything else, the streaming should be continuing at this point, as I've said before. By the time this one comes out, we may be done with the Erebor campaign and moving on to what is more likely going to be a Bree campaign, I think. But we'll see on that one. Kind of depends really what I'm feeling at the moment, and if it's imminent that I have to go off somewhere and the changes are happening sooner rather than later, then streaming is going to be one of those things that does get put on the back burner for a little bit, because it's the sort of thing that I can't commit to on a regular basis and a time scale. It's better to record things in advance, because you have a bit more freedom with recording things in advance and then sort of allotting content to certain slots. But hopefully streaming will be able to continue at least through to the end of February without any sort of problem. I think I could guarantee that. Actually, I don't want to guarantee anything, because who knows? Like, it's a turbulent times we still live in. 2021, hopefully it will be better than 2020, but we can, it's one of those things. I'll stop rambling now. Anything that does, if something does happen in a short time scale, I will release a little channel update to let everyone know exactly what's going on. But the long-term plan is, of course, to have it drop down to just 2 videos or 2 pieces of content a week from the 3 to 4 that I do at the moment, which isn't a huge drop, to be fair, but it's much more manageable, and it's something I feel I could do even while in full-time employment as well. So yeah, hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you will join me for whatever is next.